I have absolutely no concept of physical space or distance. I mean, from the smallest scale to the largest. You drive me around the block, and I couldn't tell you which side the ocean is on. I mean, I know it's on the wrong side, but that's a completely different conversation. And the fact that I grew up 3,000 miles from here means absolutely nothing to me because my brain can't process what that even means. I know that it's incredibly frustrating to go to the airport and sit on an airplane for 6 hours, but I have no actual sense that where I am physically right now is a different space than other spaces. But although I'm completely useless when it comes to physical space, I'm overwhelmingly impacted by my surroundings or my place. And I think everyone is, even if it's not something they spend very much time or attention thinking about. So today, I want us to spend some time thinking about the importance of place, of why where we spend our time matters beyond the obvious functions of various places. So before I get further into this, I want to take a second to give some operational definitions for context of how I've been thinking about this. So to me, space and place are inseparable, but place must be distinguished from space. Place is a part of our everyday lived experience, whereas space is a theoretical or mathematical concept. It's an abstraction from the lived experience. And place is constantly being superimposed over space. But place occurs between body and landscape. There's a dynamic interaction between us and any place that we inhabit. They're interactive. A lot of places tell us how we are meant to engage with them. I mean, you all came into this place and sat facing this direction. This place has shaped to you what you look at. We get a pretty cool view from this side, though. I can see the surf on the beach. It's a little secret from this side. But so, places tell us how to interact with them, but they also preserve a history, and they allow us to become a part of that history, to experience it. There's a narrative and a context that conveys a specific visceral reaction to being in certain places. For those of you lucky enough to be sitting here in this chapel today, it's probably pretty easy to understand how much a place can impact you. This chapel is magnificent, and just being here, the feeling one can get is amazing. But regardless of what type of place it is, wherever we are, we're viewing the world from there. And that sounds kind of stupid and obvious, but it's important. Wherever we are viewing the world from there. And every place has a character of its own, not only in that it allows certain things to appear within it, but also its position in relation to other places. You get a certain view of other places that by the confines of space, you wouldn't be able to get anywhere else. But what does it mean to be in a place? When we talk about the philosophical concept of being in place, being in the world, The definition that I use comes from Heidegger, who describes it as in relation with the world. It's not about the spatial containment, but the active involvement. And from that, we can distinguish some of these other aspects about place. That it's about relationships. In a commentary on Heidegger's concept of place, Jeff Malpass, who's a contemporary philosopher, writes, "To be located is to be within, to be somehow enclosed, but in a way that at the same time opens up, that makes possible. Already this indicates some of the directions in which any thinking of place must move towards. Ideas of opening and closing, of concealing and revealing, of focus and horizon, of finitude and transcendence, of limit and possibility, of mutual relationality and co-constitution." Part of being embodied here on earth means being in a particular place. And this being in place is essential to our experience as human beings. God made this earth and placed us on it. The human experience is only made possible by being in place. So it is too that this place is shaped by the humans who dwell in it. And really, when we look at the Bible, it's a story about the relationship between God, people, and places. We read the creation stories in Genesis. The first thing we read is that God created space, and then he created people. But more specifically, he created the world as the place for humanity. This place is the basis of human experience, not only because it's where we are, but also that God made us responsible for it. And place is not just the ground we stand on or the walls that surround us. Every place is being actively shaped constantly. And our entire existence is about how we relate to God through what God has created for us in this place that God put us. And throughout all of Scripture, God is sending people places. So much of the Old Testament is about being displaced, wandering the desert, leaving Egypt, seeking a resting place. And at Christmas, we just read the birth narrative in the Gospels. That whole story is about place, about where Joseph and Mary were from, where they were going. And the place that Jesus is born is one of the things we highlight most about the entire story. Even if you know nothing about the Bible, you probably know that Jesus was born in a manger. And I stand up here each week and read our scripture passages aloud, and each time I think, oh, come on, how many times do you need to say this name or this place? Especially when I don't know how to pronounce them. But they are mentioned and cited and referenced very explicitly for many reasons. On a literal level, a lot of the time when a city or place is mentioned in the biblical text, it's because of legacy or heritage. The authors of the Bible are drawing connections between people and events all throughout history. Because places are integral to the human story from beginning to end. And from the very beginning, with Adam and Eve in the garden and then being displaced. I mean, that's the beginning of our collective story. So humans are placed in a very specific situation or context. There's a line from Craig Bartholomew, who's a postmodern biblical scholar, and in discussing a Christian understanding of place, he writes, "Place is never fully place without God as co-inhabitant. Place is thus always in one way or another a theological concept. After Eden, the challenge of emplacement and the danger of displacement are a constant part of the human condition." The places we spend our time have a huge impact on our identity, not just in a socioeconomic status type of way, but in the connecting to the larger ideology or spirit of a place and claiming it as who we are. And although there are many places that a lot of people will agree resonate significantly, whether negatively or positively, the way that we each relate to any place is in our own way, depending on our culture and our life experiences. About a month ago, a young man came into the visitor center and he was asking questions about the church and about it being a Swedenborgian church. So the ladies got me involved to try and help. And he was visibly shocked when he was speaking to me. It turns out that he grew up in the General Church, the other main denomination of the Swedenborgian church here. And he had no idea what kind of church we were when he got here. The only reason he was here was because him and his girlfriend were trying to go to the beach and they couldn't find it. So they somehow came here instead and, came to sit in the chapel. And it wasn't until he exited the chapel that he saw the plaque about Swedenborg. But what he told me is that when he was sitting here in the chapel, he was overwhelmed with how familiar it felt. He said it felt like a new church. And then he walked out only to realize it is a new church. But when I was talking with him, he mentioned that he was from back east, and I said, "Oh, I am too." And so he asked me, "How did you end up here?" And my response was half joking and half completely serious. I said, "The same way you did, divine providence." And he laughed because he got the inside joke. But this story, to me, highlights this dual nature of our reality. Yes, we are spiritual beings, but we are very much embodied. And all the time when we talk about being embodied, we're focused on our perception and our experience of being in this world. But I think there's a more macro level understanding of embodiment that's about our embodiment in a certain place. We don't know why we are here, why we were placed in this time, in this place, but we were. And I think there's actually some advantages to the way that place and space work for us when we're embodied here on earth, because we have the ability to go, to be present in places that are not reflective of the state we're currently in. Because what we read in Swedenborg is, in the spiritual world, our place is determined by our inner state. The plants around us, who we're surrounded by, is all dependent on our interiors. But here on earth, I can be in a really bad mood and still be in a pretty place. And I think that's a benefit. I don't think it was an accident that we have this ability to move past our internal states while we're here. And we just got through the holiday season, but it's still winter. It's still dark for most people when they're heading to work and dark on their drive home. And this time of year is really hard on a lot of people. It's hard mentally, physically, spiritually. And when we're in these states of being depressed or ill or slothful or just exhausted, we need to take care of ourselves physically, mentally, spiritually. And hopefully we each already have some tried and true self-care practices that we can rely on when we need them. But as I was thinking about this, when I talk to people about their self-care, I usually ask, what does self-care look like for you? And they tell me, oh, I garden, I take naps, I go to the beach, I meditate. And those are all wonderful things. But I don't usually specifically ask or engage in the where of these things. And I think the place is something that's so fundamental that we overlook it. But yet it impacts us in so many ways. So I want you guys to take some time this week and think about the places that you're spending your time. What makes a place feel good? Do you have a place that you can connect with others, where you can commune with God, or where you can self-reflect? Because we need to be cultivating places that feed us, that feed our soul. We need to be spending time in places that resonate with our spirit, which means being intentional about where we spend our time and paying attention to the impact that our place has on us. Because every place you go, you are interacting with it, and it has an effect on you. So what can you do to make more places that feel like home? Places you can rest, places you can find refuge and strength. So I will leave you today with a line from a refrain in one of my favorite songs. In these bodies we will live, in these bodies we will die. Where you invest your love, you invest your life. Amen. We now come to the portion of our service where you have an opportunity to give, to support us, to support the upkeep, the maintenance, and the ministry of this